If you're a fan of Deep Purple or David Coverdale, I think you're going to love this video. Recently, we put out a video about the album Perfect Strangers, and it got me thinking about, because it came out in 1984, and it got me thinking about when David Coverdale joined Deep Purple, when Ian Gillan first left. And so what I did is I went back to that year that David Coverdale joined Deep Purple, which was 1973, and I did a bunch of searches to find some sort of an article or announcement about when David Coverdale joined the band. And I found this one, and it's, if you're watching this as opposed to just listening to it, you'll see what I'm looking at on the screen. It's a newspaper article that actually just kind of talks about David Coverdale joining, and it's really interesting, but it's very hard to read, the scan. It's a really old newspaper. It goes back to 1973. But I'm going to do my best to read this to you. I've already tried reading through it once, and it's, like I said, it's a little bit challenging, but there's enough interesting little things in here that if you are a Deep Purple fan or if you like David Coverdale, I think you'll like this. Now, keep in mind, in 1973, this is when Ian Gillan left the band. He left, it was in June of 1973, and they were huge. And matter of fact, in 1973, that's when they put out the album Who Do We Think We Are, which is the one that had Woman from Tokyo on it. And they were just, if not the biggest, one of the biggest bands in the world, Deep Purple. And then in the middle of all this, Ian Gillan decides it's time for him to leave, and he leaves the band. And right around the same time, Roger Glover, the bassist, leaves the band. And so now you just have three of the members. It was Mark II at that point of the band when they left, and then which entered in Mark III of the band, which was David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes coming into the group. Anyway, so I'm going to read this to you, and I'd love to get any feedback that you have on this, any of these things you maybe didn't know. If you're a fan of Whitesnake, because of course David Coverdale, after being done with Deep Purple, left and started that, and then there's just so many interesting things in all this history, and I'd love to get any of your feedback. So this article is called Fame When the Deep Purple Calls, and it's from the Evening Chronicle, Wednesday, October 10th, 1973. So this would have been really not long after David Coverdale joined. I don't know the exact day that he joined, but when you think about this, Ian Gillan left in June of 1973. So it's just a couple months later, they'd already found David Coverdale, and they're putting the band back together and getting ready to release or record what would have been their next album, which was Burn. That's the first album with David Coverdale, and one of the coolest Deep Purple songs of their entire catalog, by the way, in my opinion. But okay, so the article is called Fame When the Deep Purple Calls. A few weeks ago, David Coverdale was working in a boutique in a Yorkshire seaside town and singing with a local group in the evenings. Now, he is the lead vocalist with Deep Purple, one of the world's top rock groups, which made $14 million in the past year on American record sales alone. David's appointment to replace Ian Gillan came as a surprise to the rock world, which was expecting an established hit singer to take over Purple's vocals. And then it has a subhead here that says upheavals. Instead, the band chose an unknown who had never worked professionally and never sung publicly outside Yorkshire. David was born 22 years ago in Redcar, where he still lives. His father is an electrician, and there are no musicians in his family. Though he says, quote, "My mom and uncle and auntie are good singers." David began singing when he was 15 and still at Huncliffe County Modern School, Saltburn. From school, he went to Green Lane Art College, but left at 17 and got a laboring job when the financial situation at home got difficult. Later, he became a salesman at the boutique in Redcar, where he stayed until he learned a couple of weeks ago that he had landed the job with Deep Purple. Throughout the past 7 years, he has sung with local groups like the Skyliners, Rivers Invitation, Government, and the Fabulous Brothers, and has occasionally worked on the same bill as top stars like Joe Cocker and Deep Purple. When I was with Government, and this is a quote from him, "When I was with Government, we played on the same bill as Purple at Bradford University, and John Lord, Purple's organist, Said some complimentary things then about my singing. You can imagine how chuffed I was, he says. That was about 3 years ago, and I never saw them again until I went for an audition about a month ago. They said they remembered me, but I think they were just being polite. Okay. Being a fan, David had, of course, kept up to date with the group's recent upheavals. After several hit albums in Britain, Purple reached a peak earlier this year when 3 albums were high in the American charts simultaneously. But the group had personal problems, and bassist Roger Glover and Ian Gillan both announced they were leaving. The band thought of breaking up, but their sudden upsurge in success in the States decided them against it, and John Lord, lead guitarist Richie Blackmore, and drummer Ian Pace started looking for replacements. Yeah, they were so big, that would have been incredibly difficult to just drop it and break up at that point. Let's see, so then it goes subhead decisions. Glover was replaced by Glenn Hughes, who had been singing with the moderately successful group Trapeze. He came in as bassist on the understanding that he would also sing, but the group felt it still wanted another vocalist. And then it does a quote here from Richie Blackmore. We did a lot of auditioning with some very big names, but when we heard David, we knew he was right, said Richie. David went to Clearwell Castle in Gloucestershire for a week of rehearsals with Deep Purple. It went very well, he says. We all got to know each other, and I think the new lineup works. In some ways, it's a new band, but it's still got that distinctive Deep Purple sound. And then it goes on and it says, the group has no leader. It's surprisingly democratic. All the songs are written jointly. All the decisions are made as a group. Every time I referred to Deep Purple as you, they corrected it to we. They really made me feel one of them. That, by the way, I wonder if they're just being diplomatic in this, because everything I've ever read about Richie Blackmore, especially in like the Rainbow days, but he was very, very kind of heavy-handed guy when it came to these things, and he was the really the leader of Deep Purple. So anyway, I wonder about that. And it's also interesting. Well, let me just finish reading this and we'll just share a couple other things. Now he's back in Redcar until Purple get together for a European tour later in the autumn, then an American tour in January, the first Purple has made since they broke into the upper echelons. Surprisingly, the prospect doesn't frighten David. And then he says, I think I've got strength in myself, and I'm sure the others will give me more. When you've got musicians like John, Richie, Ian, and Glenn behind you, there isn't much to worry about. Let's see. His one regret is that he will have to move to London. Quote, I've been told that I'll have to make myself more available than I am in Redcar. The new Deep Purple act will bear little relation to the old in terms of material, though. The new lineup is rehearsing 2 or 3 of the old numbers, including their recent American hit single hit, Smoke on the Water. And it's interesting because Glenn Hughes, when he joined the band, he was, like it said in there, a singer. And when you listen to the song Burn, if you've never noticed this, Burn is, like I said, it may be, I don't know if it's my favorite Deep Purple song, but it might be. I love that song. It's so awesome. But Glenn Hughes actually sings some of the lead in the song. So at the beginning, the sky is round, don't understand, but that's all David Coverdale. But when it gets to the middle part, we have no time, it could not even go. That's I don't remember the words. Anyway, that's Glenn Hughes singing that part. So Glenn was a really, really exceptional singer. But I love David Coverdale, though, especially when you get him into the Whitesnake days. His voice was so fantastic. And Glenn Hughes is a good singer in his own right, but David was special. He really was. And clearly they knew that here. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I find these things super fascinating. And of course, please follow the channel, like the video. If you have any friends that you know that are into classic rock and especially Deep Purple, and you probably do, I encourage you to share this with them, because a lot of people love hearing these old stories and learning some of the backstory that rarely gets talked about, like this article has to offer. So anyway, with that, have yourself a fantastic day.